guys to provide feedback and to sort of share out where we've been and where we're going, which has been a lot of work. I have my partners here from HGA who you all have met before. Both Stacy and Joe have been working these past couple of months in terms of collating data for us. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of what we've heard and then how these plans are shaping this sort of neat constituent feedback and group, because there's a very large campus here with 20,000 students and 1,500 faculty who all have very interesting ideas about how this campus should transform. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and then share out how we're framing what comes first in our bond initiative, because that's really what we're talking about. What comes first? Everything is really, really important to the college. Everything is really, really important to our constituent groups, and so we want to make sure that we're sort of centering and figuring out what's the initial priority. So, next slide. Thank you. So we've been on a mad dash to meet with a variety of different groups. We've met with you all, Academic Senate. We were on Monday. We met with them multiple times. Executive team. We're hosting some forums. Hosted large forums, Classified Senate, we've been there multiple times, the College Facilities Subcommittee meeting, Management Association, College Council, Board of Trustees. You all have been a really important piece to that. We've also had a lot of smaller sort of cohort-based conversations. So you all helped us host, invited me to participate in a session that we held specifically for students. We've also hosted some for our kinesiology athletics department, as well as Foothills, our CEC campus, our non-credit folks. Our library also, we had some conversations with them, just because there hasn't always been a lot of expression about what to do in those areas as well, and how that can help inform. So all of this feedback, everybody has thoughts and priorities, which I think is really great to capture. And we sort of need to sort of put a tent in the sand and kind of start to move forward. And so the intention is that this last data gathering opportunity is to share out 2 project plan lists that then allow us to sort of give some recommendations to our Board of Trustees, who will eventually make the final decision. So, yep. I'm gonna actually skip this one. Go to the visual. This is a little bit easier. Although it's small, I'll talk through it a little bit. So after listening to a variety of different constituent groups, we've tried to couch things in core projects and then what we would call option projects, but they're additive. So core gets done and we either add option A to it, or core gets done and we add option B to it. Does that make sense? Talking really briefly about core projects. So what's really, really interesting and new for the college is that we're going to be building a brand new satellite facility. That had not, so that had not been really imagined. There had been a sort of brief statement in the Facility Strategic Plan 2020 about satellite operations, but now that our Board of Trustees has had some vision around sort of expanding and delivering some service in the Rosemead area and surrounding areas, that that became a priority project, not only in terms of focus, but also funding priorities. And so that's a new piece that has, the college has bought 5 tracts of land in order for us to build this new campus out, and so there's significant funding that has to be allocated towards that. The additional pieces so orange for your purposes are new construction. So those are our new construction, and then blue are intended to be these kind of like renovation modernization projects. So continuing on core, we have seen a tremendous enrollment growth and increase in our health sciences and natural sciences areas. And so in the sense that it exceeds current capacity, our Serafian building, if you didn't know, is a like-for-like state funded project, meaning that the programs that were in there previously have to go in there and there can be no growth. Well, those programs have exponentially grown since that time, and so all of the programs that need to go in that building are not going to be physically capable to do so. And so we're thinking through how then we add to that piece so that there's an additional health and sciences building kind of east of Serafian. And then Galloway Plaza, that's being sort of really imagined as an extension of the library. And meaning, like, think about all the study time that you have in the library and you just want a moment to kind of come out and be loud or talk or get some food, right? That you could then spill out into that Galloway Plaza area and there'd be a cafe there that has lots of collaboration space, food, hot and cold on the east side of campus, just so that you're not having to walk over to Piazza. Our sustainability focus starting point on the core project list is an extension of photovoltaics, so our ability to generate. So all new buildings will have PV installed on all rooftops for us to be able to generate energy and store it, as well as then our first projects for lots 1 and 3 and lot 5. And so we've done some calculations on how we're going to be able to kind of help that carbon footprint on this campus related to that, some of those initial projects. So we're really excited about that. And then on the right-hand side, you have a bunch of renovation projects. We have mirror pools, Sexton. You guys spend a lot of time just kind of hanging out by the mirror pools too. A lot of people see that area as a real functional, like we want to make it a more functional, beautiful space. There's a lot of seating options that we've shown, that we can bring in some power in that area. So if you want to sit outside, do some courses and things like that, that's going to happen. So those projects are there. And then some identification of some underutilized area on campus, which is our boiler house. You're probably like, what is that, Candace? I've never heard of the boiler house. It's right next to facilities. It's this big old box that
used to be storage.
Yes, and continues to be, but we need to sort of reutilize that space as well as Lancers Pass. And so the thought process for boiler house, that's actually going to be a sustainability adaptive reuse project. And so they're going to gut that building and sort of rebuild, make that 2-story, use all the framework there in order to then move some of the administrative spaces out of like the library. The whole basement floor of the library, most of it is dedicated to information technology services. And so we're wanting to move those out so we can create more student focus, more instructional spaces in that building, as well as then some other administrative areas, getting it out and releasing that space back to instruction. Our aquatic center is a big piece in terms of renovation, so that actually requires a complete demolish of all of the decking and piece, complete replacement of all the pool equipment, so that's why it's tied to the W building. You can't demolish one without the other, they go hand in hand. So then when you get into options, so if you think about like, that's my first menu, like core. Well, we want to layer on. That doesn't take up all of the bond funding, all of the Measure PCC funding. So how can then we creatively think through all of the various things that we've heard from various constituent groups and then add to those pieces? And so it gets us then with option A or option B. And let me say, the fundamental difference between this is the large academic or student services building between the two. And let me go back to saying, this isn't an issue of saying one, we're not gonna do one. Both will be done. But the question is, what do we do first? What do we do first? Because we have to figure out what to do first in order to sort of move the campus forward. So what we're asking your input on is to help us guide what should we do first. We know what core projects are happening, but these are some additional pieces, and I'll walk through those. So one, in terms of option A, is a student services building. So building that up, it's a 70,000 square foot building. That building right now is a little bit under 40, I think it's like 38, it might be, square foot. So it's doubling the size of that building to consolidate all of the various student service areas across campus. So imagine you guys are popping from V building to L building and so forth, and so you're going to success centers, and there's all these empowerment programs that are all over campus, whether it be our dream center. So the goal and intention is how can we really consolidate services in one area, and that's student services. The second is an expression of, we've heard, so I appreciate again you all hosting a session for us related to the facilities plan, and particularly as you're thinking about W buildings. So The actual feedback that happened in that session is, hey, we want to know what the permanent plans are for the college. That's what was expressed. What are the permanent plans for dance and these other movement-based courses? And so in this option, we've got to really, again, our goal was to look at underutilized space on this campus. You guys familiar with the annex area? Annex is those 5 little bungalows that are kind of like randomly placed by the GM and Center for the Arts building. To actually build a 2-story building there that'll be very focused on movement-based courses. So whether that is for our performing arts and communications areas, so dance, or also hosting our kinesiology, so fencing and yoga, because we don't have enough space on campus to really sort of be intentional, like those spaces were designed for those purposes, right? And it's also in the footprint of the career community. So there isn't a randomness about why that's been placed there. The career communities that are expressed in the facilities master plan, that is the footprint for those types of courses. It becomes an extension of the CA building as well as an extension for the GM building. That's like that right crux in between, which we really like, and we really think that that would be a great move for those programs. Then a host of renovation projects, so some work in the library. LL building is the library, so do some remodeling there to release instructional space back. Some small remodels in the Center for the Arts building, some renovations for our foothill. Again, we went to a variety of constituents who feel like if there's some low-hanging fruit that we can start doing some immediate action on this campus, help us, with these pieces. And then the GM building as well also has some underutilized area. We heard from them that if we took some more focused initiative on some smaller based projects, that actually might benefit the most amount of students, right? Our goal is how can we use these fundings to benefit all of our instructional activity and as many student-related servicing activities as well. So that's that. And then option B is a brand new academic building, and that is twice the size of our current W building. Again, the expansion of what's happening in our CTE programmings. We do not have programming or instructional space today for CTE programs. Think of like EV charging stations. Where are we doing that on campus? We don't have the infrastructure or the instructional space to do that for folks to, again, teaching people how to, how to continue to maintain an infrastructure for an EV charging certificate or other sort of programming pieces that tie to CTE, as well as movement-based. So if we went with option B, the thought process is, okay, so we can then strategically plan then movement-based courses in that academic building, right? So we've accommodated that need in either option, right? Accommodated a permanent expression in either option. And then the renovation pieces would be largely tied around our E-building renovation. And then if we went with option B, then it'd be a larger sort of remodel of the library. So those are the pieces. We have a bunch of sort of maps. So Wayne, if you scroll down just a little bit. So take this next map, next one, yep. So this kind of overlays you just so you have a visual in terms of the touch points of both core options. So if you see, again, orange, back to that original list, becomes the new construction pieces. Blue are a host of renovation pieces across campus. You see on our top upper right, there's some work that's gonna happen at Foothill to help manage our non-credit populations, and then some work, of course, on our brand new Rosemead campus. So it just kind of gives you a visual of that. Photovoltaic on those lot 1, lot 3, and lot 5 as our starting points. Again, all new buildings will be Cal Green certified, as well as then have the ability to generate their own power. And then the next one is core and option B, which is just, scroll down one, yep. That just overlays again core to show then the renovation projects become E-building, and then a larger renovation happening in the library. And then a new academic building next to the pool. So what we love you all to do is give us a little feedback. We're always interested in terms of, again, the expression is not what doesn't happen. Everything's gonna happen. Question is, what happens first? What happens first? So I've got a little survey link that I will share with both Wayne and Avery, like I normally do, so they can get it out to the collective. That will also go out to students. Hey, Ella, you come in. That'll go out to students as well to get some final feedback, and then as we're formulating the recommendations to our trustees, the data that will be shared both at College Council and then our board subcommittee meeting and our board meeting is, we've done some calculations in terms of all the EV all the photovoltaic generation on campus to show you how much power we're gonna be able to generate. So they've done calculations not only on those 3 projects, but other projects that we're anticipating for the duration. We've done some new parking calculations because we also understand the parking is a concern. So we're generating, so we'll show that data. Sustainability survey data, we're gonna share that data. We've got data from enrollment and our enrollment projections for 10 years and also staffing projections. That'll be a part of that piece. Am I forgetting anything, Joe or Stacy? In terms of data pieces. Oh, and then calculations and pricing on what helps us decide to go for the calculations for renovation or remodel. Or remodel, replacement. So all of that, those calculations will also be shared out. Thoughts? I'll pause.
You know, open up the conversation.
Please.
Yeah, I just gotta ask, because I know like most of the health science buildings is surrounding buildings, so for a science village, will that still remain the same, or like, are there any talks about renovations?
That's a good question, Alden, I'm glad you asked me. Okay, so Science Village will continue to be a swing space area for us. So remember, not all of the faculty from Foothill or Science Village can fit into the new Serafian building. So some portion of them will continue to be in Science Village. As the new Health and Sciences building gets built and they move into there, we're also, Science Village becomes a swing space opportunity for E building. So as we renovate E, then we can fully vacate E building into Science Village when that's remodeled, and then those classes are held there, and then they go back into E, and then that footprint becomes a really sort of interesting future imagining session. We have actually deliberately not programmed that area to like consistently be able to check in with what the needs are in the campus, so that we can then 5 years from now to sort of say, hey, maybe we want to expand this program, or maybe we need this. So that footprint isn't currently programmed.
So it's a future building site.
Yes, future building. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, with the student services, that building, is that gonna combine like all of it, like, is that gonna document? Because I know like most of the resources are scattered everywhere.
Yes.
So with that building, it's gonna have all of it in one.
Yes, that's the intention, to
That's
consolidate
good.
those services.
So if that building's gonna consolidate a lot of those student services, what will happen, like will CDC also be in there? And if that's the case, what will happen to the CDC building?
So currently, we actually appreciate where the CDC is today, because whenever you're bringing sort of childcare within sort of a lot of, there's additional sort of concerns and considerations. So our intention is to keep CDC there and do some models and updates. They're currently in an architectural work to get new play structures and shading for CDC. So we have some project-based work under scheduled maintenance that'll happen there.
I guess I have a question.
Please.
I know you mentioned like how to get things started for A and B, choosing like what is the consensus? Do you feel like that students, faculty, they want to get started first in regards to option A and B? Like,
so it's early. it's and I don't want to even tell you because I don't want to like shade your vote. Like I want you to vote on what you vote without sort of influencing you. So I'm gonna ask for some consideration to not share that, and for you to just vote with what you think the priority should be.
Okay.
Again, first versus second.
So I had a couple questions.
Of course, Guy.
When you say like we're gonna prioritize one project over the other, what's the time difference between one starting or finishing one and the next one finishing?
Good, so think about this all as sort of like 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And the first coming in the first 5 years, and then the second piece is coming in the next.
Wait, I know for option A, you said CA building renovation. What's wrong with that? That's like one of the newer buildings.
It is, it's a small sort of reimagining of space, so if that's selected, what would happen is, as the IT area comes out of the library, that administrative area comes out of a library, and the library is designated back to library and instructional use, then what would happen is, there's a program that in the CA building would leave CA building and come to that space, and then we sort of remodel that space for a new CA purpose. They call it like V-Studio. That's what we're working on with those. Like a studio type of space in that area.
Anybody else have any questions?
But what are your initial thoughts?
Seems like personally, you guys can say whatever you want, but what I think is that option A seems like a lot more busy work and a lot more effort, and so I think to limit the amount of displacement students feel, especially students who are going to be impacted by the W building demolition, it seems like we should get the hard stuff out of the way first.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, that's what I think, because if we start with option B, which is less effort and just less overall projects and busy work to do, we're putting some of the more heavier projects afterwards, and I think that's just gonna sort of disrupt students a little bit more if we postpone that, in my opinion. That's what I think, but please.
Can I only offer one thing? The sequencing of any of these projects has to be strategic and thought in
Yeah.
terms of like how. So in both options, whether option A or B, we'll take that into consideration. So like all of those things wouldn't happen at the same time, right? So fortunately, like the Rosemead campus is off-site, so we can like, we're not gonna disrupt nobody. We can do whatever we want there. Health sciences, to your point, Avery, like as we're sort of imagining what's happening there, we'd have to stagger that with,
Of course,
right, you know, in terms of, so I hear the feedback of making sure that we're being really intentional about the staging and the phasing of those pieces to be the least impactful to students. Okay?
Yeah. What's the time span between like all these projects?
So it's one of those, so we wanna pick a direction so that we can do that work. So it's hard for us to do that work twice on projects that like, once we pick a direction, we will then give out the sequencing pieces of which one gets chosen. Fortunately, there's a lot of design work that has to happen in new construction work. So that's gonna be invisible work to the campus, right? So it's not gonna be a lot of visible work on Rosemead or Health and Sciences building, Student Services, or the academic building, because there's a lot of work with these people. They sit down and they're listening and they're like, what program and how many people and da-da-da and how many square foot? I mean, it's, do you wanna just describe that?
Takes a long time to build a building.
Yeah.
I would say probably the quickest, so if you take any one of those projects and start today, you probably will not see construction happen in the field, actually to see the construction for 3 years. Just because of the process of. Right, exactly, right, but you'll be able to come back. But you are making, sharing your voice for the future, students, and population of the campus, right?
Which fortunately they do on a host of different things. Like they're consistently really mindful of like, it's not only what they're leaving today, this group has been really mindful of what they're leaving in the future, which I think is pretty awesome. One thing to note though about even, so the design process is just design, right? We gotta program it, there has to sort of be a visual, conceptual design of the building. All of that has to be state approved, so it goes to DSA.
That's a big chunk of the time.
That's a big chunk of the time.
You have to go to the state architect for basically plan check. If you've heard the term plan check, you know, they make sure that everything is being done according to the codes and everything, full accessibility, structural safety, fire life safety, and then you get approval, and then the college can bid out or, you know, start the actual construction of the project. And it just takes time.
Which maybe going back to then Avery's points, like as it's taking time, these other renovation projects can jump. Do you see what I mean? So it might not be like, yes, those construction projects have started, but they might not have a physical representation on campus yet, which might allow us to do these other smaller renovation projects. I think that gets to your sequencing
Ooh,
question.
okay, yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And also
But there's
like-
invisible work that's happening on those pieces, so maybe then we do some renovation work at Foothill that's smaller.
We're also trying to be mindful of the disruption, which I think was part of the
Yeah, it was
comment
part.
as well. Disruption to the campus, right? That you don't want to disturb a lot of areas, displace, you know, make it difficult for students and faculty to navigate the campus because everything is fenced off and you can't get around. So being mindful of when things occur and what kind of sequence, so it isn't, you know, it's tolerable, I guess.
Because construction is inconvenient. Let's just be honest.
Especially if it's in the middle of the campus, right? Serafian right now is kind of on the edge, so maybe it doesn't really impact, but if you park in parking structure at 5, you know, you walk by it every day, so you kind of see it. But if it's something happens in the middle of the campus, that's when things get closed off and detours and everything happen.
Okay, I have a question regarding that. So if you close off, which part of the campus would you close off for annex? If you decide to build a permanent, building in annex?
So we don't have to actually close off, we just have to fence off probably the walkway from lot 5 to like the start of that CA building. Like we wouldn't let you come that way. You'd have to go the VC route to get into the Lancers Pass area as opposed to between GM and the CA building route. That just walking traffic would be closed off.
But students are free to use the GM.
Absolutely. We wouldn't close those, yeah. That construction would not cause us to close CA or GM building. It just would modify the traffic patterns on campus.
I actually kind of like the idea of, because I know that you said that all these other works are being done, not like physical, but it's works being done. Getting these other works that can be physically done while these other things, that way there's no dead time, really, you can continue working, right?
We're gonna ask you to vote. You get to click whatever option you feel moves you. We framed it, we've given some explanations, some context, so people can kind of read through and then give their options.
Do you wanna call in for a vote?
Yeah.
I had a couple, can I ask one more question?
Sorry, it's advertising.
So for option B, the academic CTE building, do we know, so we're trying to expand this space because we're expecting higher enrollment. Do we know when that higher enrollment is slated to come in?
Those programs are already expanding, like the CTE programming piece is already sort of growing. They're creating new programs for CTE today that we actually can't accommodate.
Got it.
So there's sort of like, again, EV charging certificate is a certificate program that's already in flight, and yet we don't have an instructional space to teach it in. So that's happening today. And then there's some additional sort of academic and the movement-based courses we're thinking about having there. If we didn't go with the new annex building, they would be in the new academic building.
So to follow up, does option A have any sort of needs where we can't accommodate them today, the same way option B does?
Ask it differently, Scott, what do you mean?
Like, in option, right now you're saying option B, in the next couple of years, we won't be able to accommodate those students, or we might not have capacity for the demand we're looking at. Do we see anything similar in option A?
Option A would be the permanent location for movement-based courses. That would be the equivalent of what you're asking to in option B.
I think what he's asking also, what happens to the expansion of CTE programs
At
with
that
option A? Is that correct?
I'm just
Sort of?
kinda, it sounds to me like option B has almost more demand right now today, and then option A is kind of improving on what we already have, but we don't see the demand for right away.
Especially because the e-building is very outdated.
Yeah.
It is insanely outdated.
And if we're gonna move what the swing space is in option A to option B, if we go with that, I don't see the need to prioritize option A nearly as fast as we do option B.
Okay.
We don't have any more questions. You want us,
So you all can't go to a vote because remember this is a discussion item.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
informational.
alright.
So we will
But we do have
send,
the
I will
survey.
send, the survey link to you too, and if you wouldn't mind distributing it to this group, and then we'll handle the distribution to students. We'll do that.
Cool.
Alright, thanks
Thank you so much,
guys.
Candace.
You're welcome.